Hello, my name is Jerry Russell, and I teach at Apopka High School. And this is my YouTube video to teach my kids how to do a DBQ under the 2020 formats. What I did was I took an old AP, and this is for my AP World and my AP European students, and I'm in a bit of a rush if I do this and stumble over my words, which I do even when I'm not in a rush. Um, anyway, this is an older AP World History practice DBQ that I've edited. There's a whole bunch of documents, and I reduced it down to 5. And my goal here is to show you how to make an attempt to get 9 out of the 10 points on the 2020 DBQ and earn yourself a 4, possibly even a 5. All right, moving on here. Here's my email address. And remember, at any point during this video, if you hear me say pause, I'm just saying you can pause here and write anything down and move on. That'll make the video a little bit shorter. But if you need to contact me to get the actual DBQ this was based on, you can email me at that address. The reason I'm making this available is I know some of my students are sharing this with their friends at other schools and in other classes. And I make no claims that I'm any better than anybody else. Um, I have graded the DBQ, I think, 4 times at the AP World reading, so I'm fairly experienced in how it's done. All right, here we go. All right, so the first thing they're going to do is they're going to give you the prompt and sometimes a historical background. Here is the prompt. Okay, and this is from several years ago. It was not written for the 2020 exam. There's some problems with it applying this to the 2020 exam, and I'll go over them. But here's the question. Using the following documents, analyze the effects of the Cuban Revolution on women's lives and gender relations in Cuba in the period from 1959 to 1990. Now, neither of my classes, AP World or AP European, got this far this year before we were sent home and quarantined because of the coronavirus. However, I have talked a fair amount about socialism, which is what this is about, and a lot of my kids are familiar with it. So we're just going to make it work because this is the DBQ that I chose to do this with. Now they give us a little historical background, and here it is. And Cuban revolutionary Fidel Castro assumed power after overthrowing the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista in January 1959. Castro then began a radical restructuring of Cuban society along socialist lines. So knowing that, now by the way, a lot of facts here in this, you can't get credit for using any of them in the DBQ, okay? But anyway, keeping that in mind, did Castro make women's lives, how did he change their lives? It doesn't necessarily have to be better or worse, but that's how I'm going to look at it. And gender relations is how men and women get along. Okay, analyze is anytime you see analyze or discuss or evaluate, those are usually easy DBQs because you can basically group the documents any way you want as long as you're logical and you interpret them correctly. The problem with this essay is it appears to give you 2 topics, women's lives and gender relations. So you're going to notice that I address both of those in my DBQ. All right, so making a DBQ chart outline. What I want you to do on a piece of paper, if you were writing this down, number your paper 2, 3, 6, 8, and 10, and you don't need to skip lines. Now, the reason I'm doing this is these are the document numbers I'm using, and I did not have enough time to go back and change them. On the day of the actual 2020 exam, I'm going to tell all my students, have your paper numbered, well, 1 through 5, not 1 through 7. Told you that I went so quickly, there's probably going to be a lot of mistakes in this. So they're going to have a piece of paper numbered 1 through 5, and they're going to be programmed to do this. What you do is you read the question and the historical background, you read through the documents, and you write down your initial impression. And that is going to help you group them and come up with your thesis, which will then lead to your body paragraphs. All right, moving on. Remember, you can pause anytime you want. Okay, so here is document 2, our first document. Now, this DBQ has the attribution who said it or wrote it at the top. Many times it's at the bottom. I tell my students always read who said it before you read the document, because remember, you're going to analyze the document to see what the answer to the question is. And you're also going to analyze it for what they call sourcing, or what my students call CAPS, something most teachers call HIPS or HIPPO. And it's analyzing the unique perspective of the person who did it. So let's look at this. This is Yolanda. Anyway, I'm going to tell you to pause it here so you can read the whole thing. Okay, now I hope you've unpaused. Let's look at who said this. This is a female politician in Cuba. So she's living under this socialist regime, and not so she's a female and she's a politician. And of course, politicians want people to like what they say. I don't know whether or not they really have free elections there under this system, but she's general secretary. General secretary is basically the same thing as being the president or chairman. She's head of a Cuban Women's Society, and this is a speech. Okay. So anyway, without reading this document to you, because you've already read it, this basically says it did good things. It educated women. It did away with racism and prejudice. It made them equal to men, equal to each other, helped to make them healthier. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to put what my initial impressions are. My initial impressions are, this sure sounds like things are better. And I misspelled caps. What is the caps for hippo? I'm going to go ahead and analyze this. And I already told you this. She's in charge of a women's organization, and she's making a speech, probably to a bunch of women, but we don't know that. So anyway, I'm going to show you what to do with this later on. I will go ahead and tell you now, in your body paragraphs, when you analyze a document, if you want to get the points for sourcing caps or hippo, it's got to be two-part. You got to say who said it. I'm holding my hand up here. I don't know if you can see that. Who said it and what their unique perspective is. I'll put these two hands. Look, that's what Trump does in his things. It's got to be two-part. You can't just say, this is from a woman. You'll get no credit from that. You'll say, this is from a woman who, and I'll give you some details later on. So that's document 2. So those of you who've had me, you would put this in one of your parts of your DBQ chart. Some of you are not going to know what that is. All right, moving on here. Audience, this is a speech, so she's probably trying to make a point. We're going to come back to that. You could analyze her point of view. You could analyze her audience. You know, she's making a speech. You could actually look at her purpose. What's her purpose? She's trying to say things are better. Okay, moving on. Document 3. This one's really actually kind of funny. This is, let's look at, so I'm going to pause it and let you read it. Okay, unpause it. So this is from a guy who supports the revolution. And he's interviewed by an American down in Cuba in 1969, 10 years after Castro took over. And he wants his wife to stay at home. Even though he likes the Cuban Revolution, he doesn't like the fact that his wife has all these rights. She goes out and works. He wants her to stay home. The old joke, you know, that she should be barefoot pregnant behind the kitchen sink. He's very much a traditionalist or a conservative. And, you know, like I said, tempted to make lots of jokes here. I'm not going to do that. But you would remember we were looking at how did this change the lives of women and how did it affect gender relations. I'm going to assume that if he doesn't want his wife working, and she is, that there's trouble over that. They fight. Doesn't mean they're going to get a divorce or anything like that. It just means it's probably has soured based on this document, gender relations. So this is my initial impression. Sure sounds like there's trouble between them, and this does not go with number 2. So document 2 says things got better. Document 3 shows there's trouble between this guy and his wife. So they're not going to be grouped together. Okay. And again, you can read this on your own. Let's move on. Here's document 6. Now, document 6 is very interesting. I want you to pause it and read it. Okay. Now, first off, let's look at who did this. This is Castro's daughter. This is stunning. The guy who led the revolution, his own daughter doesn't like it. If you look down here, she says, hey, I got pregnant. I need to take time to have a baby, and I got kicked out of school. You know, we don't have enough. We're poor. There's no water, but the Minister of Transportation has enough extra water to build a swimming pool. She does not like socialism under Cuba. She does not like her dad's regime. You can have a field day from many, many different levels on sourcing this. Also, look at this. She published her memoir in the United States. And again, we didn't get to this in my history classes, but I think most of you know the United States has a chip on its shoulder with Cuba. So the fact that most Americans did not like Castro, it actually became an issue in this presidential campaign with the candidate statements that he made about Castro here in the last couple of weeks. So the deal is most Americans do not like Castro. And so she's writing a book about her life, talking about how bad Castro's Cuba is. She may have overstressed this just to sell copies of the book. Anyway, this would say This document says it made things worse, that the Cuban women were better off before the revolution than after. So it looks like we have, I wrote here second, but our third group, looks like we have a document that says things were better, one that says things were worse, and one that says it caused trouble between men and women. Now, those of you who had me before, what you're seeing right here, remember, you only have 5 documents. You're seeing your 3 arguments that will go in your thesis. Now, let's just see if these next documents fit into these categories. If not, we've got a problem, but let's see what we got. Remember, when the College Board wrote this DBQ, they had an idea about what they wanted you to write. They wrote the DBQ because they wanted you to come to certain conclusions. Okay, and again, you can read this later on at your time, on your own leisure time. All right, I've got here her point of view. I've got here her audience. Found out later on, Castro was not married to her mother, so it's possible she felt abandoned by her dad. Of course, you wouldn't know that in this DBQ, and you always have to be careful what you say in DBQs because your readers are human too, and they have prejudices. And I know should not be taken into account, but you don't want to offend your reader. But it's possible, she was angry at him. But again, most high school kids in 45 minutes would not have time to know all that. All right, moving on here. Here's document 8. Pause it and look at it. So I'm just going to tell you, document 8 says things. This is another document saying it made women's lives better. Their education levels are up compared to other countries in the region, and they're out there making money more so than other women in their region. There's been, not only are they doing better, there's been a dramatic improvement. So this is going to match with document 2. And again, you can read this at your own. I would probably stay away from caps or point of view. You can do it if you know who published the chart. You can say the numbers are biased, possibly, but in this case, I would leave it alone. All right, and our final document is document 10. And basically, pause it and read it. Okay, so again, let's look at the analysis of who said it. She's saying things are better, but men aren't doing their equal burden, so it's hurting women. So you could use this as an argument saying that it's made things better. You could use this as an argument that it says it made things worse. You could use this in the gender relations argument. And it's possible that you could use this in all 3 body paragraphs. That's, a lot of kids don't understand that. You can use a document in more than one group, in all 3 groups for that matter, but you're not going to have a lot of time. I would put this in that it made things worse for women, okay? And again, as far as caps and point of view, once again, this is a woman speaking to a group of women, and she is president of the group. And she's also a member of the Communist Party. So whatever that means. And so you can read what I wrote down here at the bottom. I'm trying to move quickly here. And you can pause this and look at that. All right, now let's briefly review the new College Board rubric. And so you can pause this and look at it. This is my way of putting it. This is not how they put it. You get 1 point for contextualization, 1 point for thesis. Those both go in the introduction. If you just use 2 documents to describe them, you get a point. That's the easiest point. If you argue with 2 documents, you get another point. If you argue with 2 more documents, you get yet another point. Sourcing, which I have done for every single document except the graph, you get a point each time you do that correctly. Outside evidence, you get up to 2 points for that, which we're going to find out is the hardest thing on here other than the unicorn point. I'm not even going to attempt to do the unicorn point. And at this point, I'm going to stop the video, and the rest should be in video number 2.